The film commences in 1974, introducing us to Jeffrey Dahmer, a freshman in high school. Residing in Ohio with his parents Lionel and Joyce, alongside his younger brother Dave, Jeff is depicted on the school bus heading home. En route, he notices a jogger, captivated by the sight to the extent of rising from his seat just to observe. Upon disembarking, he continues watching until the jogger vanishes from sight. Upon reaching home, Jeff encounters his mother conversing with an interior decorator tasked with renovating their house. This decorator has cerebral palsy, and Jeff imitates him, drawing reprimand from his mother. Subsequently, while walking with a plastic bag, Jeff encounters neighboring teens curious about its contents, which he discloses to be a deceased cat. He elaborates on his intention to dissolve it using chemicals procured from his chemist father's laboratory shed. The intrigued boys accompany Jeff to the shed, witnessing his collection of dead animals in jars. As Jeff proceeds to dissolve the cat, explaining the process's duration, the boys remain skeptical. In a bid to convince them, Jeff smashes a jar, causing the acid and dissolved animal to spill, leading to their disgust and departure, branding Jeff a freak. Later, during dinner, Jeff's preference for dark meat is dismissed in favor of his brother. Conversation reveals Lionel's desire for Jeff to improve his social skills, challenging given his social ostracism and bullying at school. The following day, an awkward boy approaches Jeff during lunch, inviting him to a concert, and offered Jeff accepts. In a later biology class, Jeff is captivated by a preserved animal in a jar, leading him to sneakily take it to his father's laboratory shed after school. Upon arriving home, he overhears his parents arguing about Joyce's decision to return to work. Lionel expresses concern, citing her recent release from a mental hospital, but Joyce brushes it off. Sensing his younger brother's discomfort, Jeff guides him away from the conflict. The next day, after band practice, Jeff witnesses his only friend being bullied, but chooses to walk away to avoid trouble. Later, Lionel returns home early and discovers Jeff spending hours in the shed. Frustrated by Jeff's social isolation, Lionel bursts into the shed, discarding his collection and vowing to dismantle it. Jeff is devastated as the shed was his only source of solace. Despite Lionel's actions, Jeff salvages a few animal bones from the wreckage. Sitting by the roadside, he rolls the bones in his hands as he watches the jogger pass by. Later, Lionel apologizes for his harshness, expressing his desire for Jeff to have a more social life. As a peace offering, Lionel gives Jeff dumbbells, hoping he'll attract attention from girls. Though he accepts the gift and starts working out, Jeff secretly continues his passion for collecting bones in the woods. One day, when a history teacher asks Jeff a question, he responds in a silly voice, imitating his mother's interior designer. Unexpectedly, Jeff's antics elicit laughter from the entire class, presenting him with an opportunity to forge friendships. This prompts him to engage in strange noises and gestures as he walks through the hallways. He even feigns a seizure, successfully eliciting laughs from his peers, which becomes his signature move. Soon, a group of boys named John, Neil, and Mike, amused by Jeff's humor, invite him to join them for lunch and form the Dahmer fan club. Bonding over their shared sense of humor, they devise elaborate pranks to spice up their senior year. Their antics include blaming random noises on unsuspecting classmates in the library and pretending to have seizures in the hallway. Despite his newfound social circle, Jeff is troubled by his mother's relapse into drug addiction, urging her to seek help to no avail. Meanwhile, during a fishing trip with friends, Jeff's violent behavior alarms them when he cuts open a fish instead of releasing it. As they brainstorm for a prank for the school yearbook, Jeff suggests being inserted into every club photo despite not being a member of any. The group embraces the idea, executing it the following day with Jeff's deadpan expression contrasting the smiling faces around him. Returning home with John, Jeff excitedly shares his club photo escapade with his father, only to find him embroiled in another argument with his mother. Amidst all this, Jeff continues his secretive infatuation with the jogger until one day, they unexpectedly encounter him, revealing he's their family doctor, Dr. Matthews. Later, Jeff finds his parents arguing yet again, highlighting the underlying tension in their household. Jeff's father resorts to alcohol to soothe himself, but Jeff slyly pilfers the bottle, marking the beginning of his own drinking habits. From then on, he indulges in alcohol. The next day at school, Jeff and his friends engage in casual conversation until their drug-dealing classmate approaches them. He brandishes a pocket knife inherited from his Nazi father, then proceeds to self-harm, a sight that unsettles everyone except Jeff, who remains unfazed. Over time, Jeff's drinking escalates, leading him to attend school while under the influence. During an overnight trip to Washington, D.C., Jeff shares a room with Charlie, the only black student in his class. In a moment of racial insensitivity, Jeff poses a disturbing question about the color of internal organs, to which Charlie reacts with initial discomfort, but ultimately brushes off. The following day, as the boys stroll through the streets of D.C., they just about securing an interview with the vice president for their school newspaper. Jeff takes this notion seriously and heads to a nearby phone booth to place a call to the White House. To the astonishment of everyone, he successfully obtains a pass into the building. Inside, they enjoy a brief conversation with the vice president, leaving them filled with joy. They return home on a high note after the delightful trip. However, Jeff's happiness is short-lived when his father delivers the news of his impending divorce from Joyce. This deeply saddens Jeff, and his thoughts about Dr. Matthews further complicate matters. Following this, he pretends to be sick and makes a visit to the doctor. Dr. Matthews performs a thorough examination of his body, and during the hernia check, he feels uneasy noticing Jeff's erection. As a result of this experience, Jeff starts to understand his sexuality, leading him to stay quiet when his friends discuss girls. Over time, his friends begin to notice his unusual behavior and emotional distance. Later, the narrative shifts to the day when the yearbook photos are printed. The fellows laugh upon seeing Jeff in every single photo. But when the professor notices this, she uses a marker to blot him out of the images. In the meantime, Jeff is saturating in both his parents' impending divorce as well as his hormonal awakening. To solace himself, he locks himself up in his room and visualizes himself cuddling Matthew's body and result in increase in height of hormone gun. On the other hand, Jeff's buddies are hanging out when a couple of their classmates tease them for being boring since they aren't with Jeff recently. Feeling challenged, John bets that he can get Jeff to perform a fake seizure at the mall this weekend. Neil isn't comfortable to hear this because he feels like they're using Jeff as their entertainment toy. Nonetheless, John goes on with his plan and bribes Jeff with some money to get him to say yes. The stage then fast-forwards to the weekend day where the boys head to the mall. There, Jeff performs his seizure act, while his buddies stand back and enjoy. One of them even records, as Jeff proceeds to humiliate himself for their enjoyment. This goes on for a while until Jeff gets tired of all of this. He seems to recognize that he's just a spectacle to these teen boys. To add up to his stress, Jeff returns home and learns from his mother that the divorce has been finished and that his father is getting the house. A few days later, the entire school starts to talk about prom. During this, Mike makes fun of Jeff, telling that there's no way any girl would want to go to prom with him. This offends Jeff, so he goes right ahead and asks a fresher named Bridget to prom. She originally refuses as he always does weird things, but he somehow manages to convince her with his goofy nature. Ultimately, the prom night arrives, and Jeff makes it to the venue with Bridget, leaving his friends surprised. But when it's time to dance, Jeff grows uncomfortable as he's not attracted to girls. Thus, he explains himself and leaves the venue, abandoning Bridget behind. The next day, Jeff returns home from school, only to find his mother stuffing her belongings into her car. Turns out she and Dave are fleeing to live with their relatives. This breaks Jeff's heart because they won't be present for his graduation. He doesn't let his feeling appear on his face, but he bursts out in tears after they leave. On the graduation day, Jeff doesn't look enthusiastic, but his father is there to cheer him up. Lionel expresses his pride in Jeff and also hands him the keys to the family car. Later that night, John is driving when he spots Jeff walking alone by the side of the street. He offers him a ride home, which the latter accepts. John then sees blood on Jeff's fingernails, but the creepy teenager simply claims that it's paint. Shortly after, they reach at Jeff's place, and he invites John inside for a beer. But as shortly as they enter, John senses something amiss as the house is in complete darkness. Afraid, he begins to walk away, saying his mommy is waiting for him. At this moment, Jeff grabs a baseball bat, intending to strike him from behind, but he momentarily changes his mind and lets him leave. On the following day, Jeff gets into his dad's automobile and drives around the city. During this, he moves toward across a hitchhiker, Steven, and gives him a lift. The film ends with the climax credits, mentioning that Steven was never glimpsed again. Likewise, Jeffrey Dahmer was captured and admitted to murdering 17 young men in 1991.